Hi.
This is Erica Leon, registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor and certified eating disorder specialist with my inaugural program, Eat, Live, Nourished, Intuitive Eating Support and Eating Disorder Recovery Support with Erica Leon Nutrition. I know that's a mouthful, but I'm so excited because I have my wonderful friend and colleague here today to share some of her amazing skills and information with all of us. And I would like to introduce her. I do have to read it though, because she has so many initials, and I've learned over the years that I mess up those initials. So okay, here we have Susan Schrott, my amazing colleague, who is a diplomate in clinical social work, a licensed clinical social worker, certified eating disorder specialist and supervisor, and a certified yoga instructor, and a professional artist. Did I get that right, Susan?
Yeah, now I feel like putting my head under a pillow because I'm feeling a lot of pressure.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you know what the bottom line is? You and I, we have worked together for years. And that is why I wanted you to be my first guest, because
I have to tell you, I think what's really appropriate to say is you and I were talking before we went live, and like a lot of people, before they have to go live and speak, we got anxious.
Yes, we did.
Right? And we were joking about that exact feeling that so many of the people that we work with come into the office feeling anxious.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that you and I know is incredibly useful and helpful to just slow down, calm down, and it's really what we're going to be talking about.
You know what? Yes, thank you.
Mindfulness, and I thought, let's jump right in. And how about you and I together, and everybody who's watching can join us for literally 1 minute of just mindful breathing. And I'll guide everybody through it and do it with you, although I will keep my eye on the clock. So why don't we just jump right in? You want to do that?
Can I share something?
Yes.
As soon as you said, we're going to do some mindfulness, I just took a deep breath, and all of a sudden, all that anxiety and nervousness just dissipated.
Well, I got this for you. Me too.
Okay.
So it's really important I just want to connect immediately. I'm going to jump right in. The power of our thoughts and how our thoughts really do drive how we feel. So just conversing about doing breathing sent our brain the message that, hey, I'm going to calm down. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to take a deep breath. And without even beginning to do that, it happened for both of us.
That's very true.
So language, cognition is so powerful. Okay?
Yes. All right, let's do it.
You know, I'm not going to do anything fancy schmancy. I'm just going to encourage whoever chooses to, as they're watching, wherever you are, except for if you're driving or, you know, operating a vehicle, if you're in an office somewhere or at home, wherever you are, if it feels appropriate for you, and you want to take a minute, we're just going to gently close our eyes and just focus on your breath. Don't worry about doing it right or wrong, because ultimately there is no right or wrong. It's breath in and breath out. Don't worry if there's thoughts. That's okay. There's no real rules here except breathing, which is probably the most natural thing our body can do for us if we allow it to happen naturally.
That's true. Right.
And if you find that, you know, you're breathing shallowly, or if the breath is not, if you feel like you're supposed to be doing something, just notice it. There's no right or wrong here. So the only thing I ask is, before we close our eyes for the 1 minute that we're going to do the breathing, that you notice how you feel now before you start your breathing. So take 15 seconds to check in and notice how you feel. Notice if there's any tension anywhere in the body. Notice if your thoughts are racing or not. Just notice. Great. Now from that place, just keep your eyes gently closed. If that's not comfortable for you, you can lower your eyes or just gaze down and start to take a deep breath in slowly, and then a slow exhalation. And again, a deep breath in and a slow exhalation. Breathing in gently, if it's available to you, through your nose, and exhaling slowly through your nose. If your nose is congested, you can breathe through your mouth and exhale through your mouth, whatever works for you. Continue breathing at your own pace and exhaling at your own pace. And we'll go for 30 more seconds. Notice the breath in and notice the breath out. Breath in and breath out. Now gently just resume natural breathing if it's comfortable with your eyes closed or lowered, however you've been sitting. Breathe naturally, and when you're ready, take your time and slowly open your eyes and once again notice how you feel. So I'll ask you, Erica, how do you feel? What do you know?
I feel much better. I have to say, yeah, I noticed a lot of things. And this is just going to say that I noticed that I was clenching my jaw, which is an interesting thing. I probably don't even realize I do it just unconsciously when I have tension in my jaw. Wow. I was feeling some tension in my stomach, in my shoulders, and I feel calm now.
So 1 minute. I think that was a minute.
So thank you.
Really, all we did was take our awareness to our breath, which brings us to the present moment, without any judgment, no rules about how to breathe, how fast to breathe, what to think, what not to think. All we did was sit and notice our breath and everything that came and went with it. That's mindfulness. That's being present.
You know what's interesting? I'm gonna share that just like being one of the anxious clients sitting in your office, the thoughts that were going through my mind. Am I doing this right? Am I breathing too? And I was thinking, until you said, go at your own pace, I was thinking, but I want to go faster. So, and you know what? I bring it up because I think our clients come in to our offices, your office, my office, thinking and expecting to be a certain way and to think a certain way. And if they wonder, am I doing intuitive eating correctly? Am I following the plan correctly? Are my thoughts correct? And you're right. It's just about just looking at them non-judgmentally, just being with them. That's it. It's a big shift.
It is a big shift. And I think that you're absolutely right. There's so many clients that come into our offices with a whole list of expectations that they project that we might have of them and of themselves. And what I love to do is create a safe, sacred, non-judgmental space. And I like to think of my office and the work that I do collaboratively with whomever is sitting in the room with me as it's almost as if, and I've never said this before, it's a new way of expressing it. I like to think of the work that we do and the space that we do it in the office as a studio. It's a place to create. There's no rules. You can make a mess as long as we stay within the boundaries of everything, of course, being safe and safely contained. It's the most creative process we can offer our clients is to allow them to bring in whatever is happening and play with it in the office in a way that they don't allow themselves anyplace else. So it's the opportunity to explore, interpret, express, play around with things that they're experiencing out in the outside world, and maybe revisit it with a much more compassionate window in, or a forgiving window in to life experiences, and any number of ways to look at what's causing people pain and suffering, which is inevitable anyway. We're all going to feel pain and suffering. But how does simply sitting and breathing connect with that? It gives us a place to be able to safely look at it. And if it's too much, you stop.
Yeah, I want to be the devil's advocate for a moment, because you and I actually we do get people who are in really working on recovery, deep in an eating disorder, not just intuitive eating, but really deep in quite symptomatic behavior, who don't necessarily connect the thought patterns with being able to take breaths. They just may be too anxious. Yes, I was thinking of a bigger word, but yes, just too anxious to even sit and be with your breath. So what would you suggest to that person, to a practitioner? How do we make a person in that scenario feel comfortable and safe?
Sometimes when someone comes in with incredibly racing thoughts, or just highly agitated, really anxious, really, you see legs pounding on the floor, a lot of twitching, moving around, a nice, simple way to ground someone and bring them into the present moment, if sitting still is just not possible, or it's just too uncomfortable, or they don't want to. This is a really interesting technique. And I like to call it a grounding technique. I'll have someone, if they're really just distracted, to start to identify objects in my office. Oh. So, for instance, if somebody's really anxious and they can't even focus and look at me, I'll say, can you name 10 things you see in my office? And then all of a sudden, their attention is focused. Their attention is focused. Their attention is focused. And it kind of brings them into the room. I mean, you could do it yourself right now. Notice 5 things in your office.
I'm noticing a yellow duck. I'm noticing a purple flower. I'm noticing a very nice clock. I'm noticing my phone that's off the hook. I'm noticing my computer on the floor. And yes,
now you're here.
I'm here. So Susan, thank you for that wonderful introduction and calming for me. Tell us a little bit more about you and how you got into this work, and just a little bit more about some of the stuff that you really do.
Well, I've been in this field for almost 30 years, and I love it more than ever. And I like to bring to my work a combination of approaches, traditional talk therapy, but what has really made the difference is bringing in a combination of yoga therapy, using yoga breathing techniques, and also acceptance and commitment therapy, which has really become the foundation of my practice. Because at the core of it is really accepting that there are things we can change, choosing values, and then taking actions that support our values. And that is really pivotal for someone who's entrenched in the eating disorder symptomatology, pain, and the behaviors that are associated with it, and the mood that is associated with it, mood states that are associated with it. So very often it's very hard to get someone who really does believe that what matters is being thin, being pretty enough, being good enough, being the best. If that's their mindset and they believe that to be their truth, they're going to keep perpetuating everything that they're going to take actions to keep that going, because that's what they think matters. So if you think that that's how you're going to have control and joy and success in your life, if you think that being the thinnest or the best all the time is going to bring you a meaningful life, you're going to do what it takes to do that. And that leads people to, really unstable medical states and disastrous places in their lives where they could potentially die. But they're caught in that cycle of believing that that's what matters to them, right? So if the value is to be the best, the value is to be the skinniest, and to be not just good, but perfect at everything, the extent to which someone might go to accomplish that is beyond the norms of any human being, and that's why they get sick.
And then I think to myself, yes, and then someone comes in with those behaviors and has so much shame and guilty feelings if they're not doing everything correctly. And, I wonder how you use this acceptance and commitment therapy to kind of help move someone away from that.
So at the end of the day, we look at very slowly and carefully. I'll just simply ask. At the end of the day, I'll ask, and I might even use myself as an example. When I'm 120 years old and I look back on my life, do I want it to say on my tombstone, here lies Susan Schrock, she was skinny.
Oh my God, that is so sad.
She was the best.
She was the best.
And everybody kind of chuckles because it's like, really, aha, get it. And it's such a simple question, but it really is like the light bulb goes off. Mm-hmm. And then we get to take little baby steps. So tell me what you want to really think about. How do you want to really live your life? Who and what really matters to you?
But I want to be skinny. I'm being silly.
Right. But you know what? Typically, once we explore it from this perspective, the aha moment is that really going to make your life meaningful? And the truth is, most people, without any struggle, they'll know. And I will ask who and what really matters to you. And it's usually a very short list. And it's usually, first and foremost, for most people, family and friends, often a pet. Sometimes when we get to the third or fourth layer, there are people who really are committed to certain areas of interest in their lives, whether it's community or specific cause or something they really believe strongly in, or a passion that they're passionate about. And that will be on the list. For some people, it'll be giving back to my community. Some people, it might be to produce magnificent works of art. For someone, it'll be to be a doctor and to help people who are suffering. So from there, we have something we can work with. In the presence of someone saying, I don't want to eat. I'm having a hard time with this feeling of not wanting to gain weight. I'm scared. I'm afraid I'll lose control. I'm afraid I'll feel ugly. I'm afraid I'll feel fat. And I can say, can we just notice that that's a thought and switch from I feel fat to I notice I'm thinking I'm feeling fat.
That's a wonderful, yeah. I wonder how that process goes. It sounds so simple.
It's not simple, but we usually work this out on paper. And when you notice that you have the thought that you're feeling, if you eat that food, you might be fat, we can notice that. But then my next question is, while you're noticing that thought, can you remind me what those values are that you said you cared about? Mm-hmm. And I'll hear family, friends, a pet, giving back to community. I'll say, great. While you're having that thought, can we do something to support that value? Can we just notice that that's a thought you're having, that you're feeling, a thought that you're feeling that way. Mm-hmm. At the same time, even though it's uncomfortable, can you also just take a few actions to support that value? Can you take one action? Can you sit and hug your pet and notice how that feels? Can you move away from the negative beliefs that you've kind of been cycling through for years that led you to your eating disorder? And can you take a moment and it's hard, to defuse from that?
Yeah, you know what I was thinking? What's really, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but I'm thinking that what is really challenging, and I see this a lot in my office when I'm talking about the food, because, we know that disordered eating disorders, body image disturbances, they're about the food, but they're really not about the food.
Never,
but clearly
it becomes about the food.
It becomes about the food. And, I see my role as helping someone sort of have some sort of semblance of control around their eating and feel better in their body, which does take quite a bit of work. But when someone is so focused and entrenched in the societal value of thin and the thin ideal, I think it becomes really challenging, because it's not just about challenging a person's belief, but the system around the person. I mean, I can't go anywhere without seeing a diet ad, a commercial for a blah, blah, blah program, weight loss program. And, we know that diets really don't work. So it's so challenging to move people from a place of understanding their values, but then being in this environment.
You're right. And I will tell you, I think being a therapist, I wish there was a better name for it, because I see myself as part of a team. And part of our work, I can speak for myself, part of my work is inspiring people to remember that in the presence of just not their own belief systems that are getting in the way, they have to step out into the world and face it again and again and again. And we all do.
Yes.
And it takes tremendous, tremendous time, stamina, and courage to be willing to say enough, enough, and at what cost? And when does that sense of self-worth, desire to love oneself, grow such that we can finally say, you know what, I get it. We cannot, as individuals, you and I can do what we can do, and we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of colleagues every day who are out there trying to make the bigger global and cultural changes. But behind closed doors, when you have someone coming in with these sick people who, who are on the verge of being hospitalized, and that's why they're not yet hospitalized, which is why they can be in our offices, it really behooves me, I feel, to be that source of constant inspiration and again, support to remind them of their values, help them stay connected in the presence of what you're describing is a real cultural phenomenon. So the answer is, it's hard. The answer is yes, we're going to come up against these messages day in and day out. But at the end of the day, we all have to live truthfully in service of our values. And whether it's a diet mentality or a political mentality or a familial mentality, whatever it is, we are all responsible for how we choose to respond to our values. Does that make sense?
That's a very good point. Thank you. Thank you.
I do this all the time. I want to make sure I'm making sense. Can you tell me what you hear me say so I know?
Absolutely. What I'm hearing you say is, and I was really challenging you to think about how, here we are, we have these individual clients or groups of clients who come into our offices, connect with us, really trying to get in touch with their true values. And of course, we want them to discontinue symptoms and to feel comfortable and safe in their bodies. But then they go out into the world, into this larger, broader culture, not just the diet culture, but families. And what I hear you saying is that, each person really has the work of choosing their values, and it may be having to challenge outside messages.
Right.
And that's okay. That's okay. But you need to be safe, first of all, to be able to do that. So I have a question, and not really even.
I feel like your answer helped me. You got it. So that's good.
Did I get it? I hope the people out there got it.
Yeah. All right.
This is really challenging work. This is changing thought patterns that have been ingrained. I mean, from birth, you grow up in a family unit, and the messages that you hear are from your parents, from your grandparents. We're not just people just coming to the planet. We grow up in an environment, and it's just so many layers.
Yes.
So thank you. I think that I like hearing that. It's that each person is responsible for doing and working on their own personal value.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I had someone in my office just yesterday, a lovely, lovely college student, and she's coming up against some patterns in her family and responses from her parents, one in particular, that tends to come across and is directed at her often with hostility or with aggression. And no matter what she says, this one parent is going to still have to have the last word or be right or kind of not be very kind. Mm-hmm. And I don't know this mom. This is an adult in my office. My job is, how do I support this person in reacting in a way that's going to make her feel good about herself? For now, we're not working on changing mom. The way I can help her is, how can you respond to that? How can you react in a way that will bring you the most, an outcome that'll make you feel good about yourself? That's it. For some people, it might be, I notice my mom or dad is saying something that is hurtful. She can choose to say, Mom, I notice when you say that, it hurts my feelings. Versus, I can't believe you said that, and in reacting. and
Yes.
judging. Just very, I notice how it makes, I notice when my mom or dad or friend or teacher says something, how it makes me feel. She can choose to not say anything and just be pleased enough to notice that that's what's making her feel a certain way. Decide if she would like to say how it made her feel. Decide if the outcome or the response she might get is it's not going to make any difference anyway. Is it worth it? But she has choices. And then, as that relates to eating disorders, if she has the choice and is taking back a sense of competency, then her self-esteem will go up. And she won't need to go home and binge and stuff those unresolved feelings down, because she will have been in her own body in the moment, observed the situation, taken the time to decide how she chooses to react. Then there's no need to stuff all that away. Whereas if she just reacted and stayed engaged in that kind of habitual pattern of aggression, reacting, feeling angry, feeling hurt, feeling disappointed, and then being upset and trying to make those feelings go away, either by binging, purging, starving, the cycle continues.
So let me ask you a question. Just
that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. Here I am. I get this question all the time from people who come into my intuitive eating programs who may have some binge eating behavior, emotional eating, not necessarily a full-blown eating disorder, but let's just pretend there's the person in the evening, had a hard day, really tired, is there in the kitchen, standing at the cabinet. What would you tell that person?
Breathe.
The scenario. What would you tell that person?
First of all, your question to me is, what would I tell them with regard to what?
What if they're really feeling this tremendous, intense need to eat? This driving force of wanting to eat everything in the cabinet.
Yeah.
Just the television set. Had a really hard.
The crux of the work that we do. And therein lies why people come week after week, to learn skills, techniques, literally, what to do. So, for instance, we prepare for that. We prepare by having distraction techniques planned ahead. We prepare to have actions prepared to support the values in the presence of those powerful, strong feelings. We prepare by learning mindfulness skills. We prepare by having a list, a toolbox. And even in the presence of that strong urge to binge and having that toolbox, there will be times when people binge. And it happens. We know that.
Yes. And, I actually say to some of my clients that, it's a pattern that's been so ingrained. You're working on unhinging from it or disconnecting from it, but it still may be protective for you, and to sort of look at it in a non-judgmental way and, sort of evaluate binge. Why did it happen? Exactly. What might you do differently next time?
Exactly.
This is where your work and my work really merges, and I think it's so important when someone is struggling with these kinds of behaviors to really have a team in terms of being supportive.
Absolutely. And the truth is that, we're a little bit all over the place with all the different things we're talking about. But at the end of the day, what really has to happen is, some of the things we're talking about doesn't happen until 4 or 5 or 6 months into therapy. For starters, people walk in the door terrified. The first thing that has to happen before anybody learns anything, forget toolboxes and skills, is, am I safe in this room with this person? Does this person know their stuff? What am I looking for in this therapist? What are my personal goals? What do I want to get out of this? Why am I here? For me, we have to be aware as we're doing this conversation that some of the things we're talking about, diffusion techniques, breathing techniques, toolboxes, that takes time to learn. And you made a very interesting point, Erica. So many of the people we meet have been engaged in these behaviors and rituals for so long that in addition to the shame and guilt, the brain has learned these behaviors very, very well. There are pathways in the brain that are so well greased, and it's so habitual and so familiar, and they're really good at these harmful behaviors.
Yes,
So
that's a good point.
it's like muscle memory.
Yes.
And to offer somebody another tool might sound nice as we're talking about it, but we have to create new pathways. The beautiful thing is that we know the brain can do that. But it took years for these unhealthy patterns to develop. People forget that your illness didn't happen overnight. Getting better doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. But it takes work. It takes practice. You know, that's why I call my therapy, my work, I have a practice. It's a practice. People get on the yoga mat. They don't go to yoga. They develop a practice. You sit down to learn an instrument and you practice. You get into a lab as a scientist and you do experiments over and over and you practice. Recovery is a practice.
Absolutely. And
so we need to give people permission to take their time and learn. There's no rush, except when it's life-threatening, and then there's hospitals, and there's levels of care. So I just want to, to kind of start over as we're nearing the end of this conversation to remind folks that it's a process, it's a practice, and it takes time, and the brain needs to be respected for what it's done for years and done well, albeit dangerously, that now we get to offer our brains and our souls and our hearts new tools, new language, new information, and we need to begin to practice it. So if you're standing in front of the cabinet like you're describing and it's 10 o'clock at night and you just want to binge and these neural pathways are going back and forth because that's what they know, and you might hear Erica, someone might be thinking, well, Erica told me to do this and Susan's recommending this, and there's that moment where the brain is going like this and the little detour we're trying to make. They might just be 2 little railroad tracks done, not years of pathways. So it takes time.
Really such a good point. In terms of thinking about when someone comes and says, okay, I want to learn about intuitive eating. And I say the same thing, it's a practice. To the notion of letting go of diets or restrictive behavior or binging behavior or whatever the behavior may be, of letting go and trying something new, it really does take time and patience and a lot of practice. People think, oh, I'm just going to do intuitive eating. It'll take me no time. No, it takes time. It could be months. It could be years to really change those neural pathways. I like that analogy. So thank you.
And the thing to remember, though, and I just want to say this as a caveat, is that at the end, first and foremost, the work we are talking about, we do outpatient work.
Yes.
At the end of the day, if people are medically unstable, first and foremost is safety first. So we assess for safety. We assess for medical safety, so that folks are medically clear to be in outpatient therapy. And then this is the realm of the work that we do. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody listening understands that.
That's a very, very good point, because there really is a wide range of medical safety, medical severity. People come to our offices. Some people really are too sick to be at an outpatient level. Right. Some people come and they're just ready to get ready to work. So, the whole gamut.
And the beautiful part for me is, people walk through my door and the first thing I ask is, you walk through my door. I am really grateful you're here. This is exciting. And I'm sure and then I give them the floor. Right. And we start from there.
Mm-hmm.
Right there.
This is why I love working with you, Susan.
And I with you.
And I have to just say that you've been working on a project, I understand.
I have been.
Would you be willing to share a little bit about that?
Sure. And it's really sort of apropos of what we're talking about, mindfulness, being present. About a little over a year ago, there were some changes in my life and in a family member's health, which required a lot of my energy and time. And I'm also, as you mentioned, an artist. And so I wasn't able to get to my studio on a regular basis. And for me, creating art has been an outlet, one of my toolboxes. And I missed it. So I came up with this idea to I am a textile artist, and I couldn't get to the studio. So I ended up taking small pieces of fabric every day that I can transport with me. So I had my art with me, and I decided every day to just do a little drawing, just to kind of like a practice and a form of meditation for myself. And I noticed as I was doing it that I started having really very loving, kind, compassionate thoughts that came along with this process of making these drawings. So I kind of connected them. And after a few days and a couple of weeks, I really got into it. And I took the big step of posting it. I uploaded them to, I think it was Facebook and Instagram. And unbeknownst to me, people started looking at them and liking them and following them. And I started getting comments. And that led to me making the decision to do one drawing and, after my personal meditation, share a quote or an inspired thought that came to me to the picture. And I decided that for 365 days, I was going to create a drawing, an inspirational quote, and click post. And I have.
Wow. That is
the book. I have 365 drawings and quotes and followers from all over the world. And there is something in motion, and hopefully I'll have some good news in the coming weeks to share about it. But again, it's no different than the work that takes place in our offices. It's a practice. It was a way for me to be mindful, for me to notice my thoughts, for me to connect with what mattered to me in the presence of a lot of stuff that was happening in my life that was stressful, challenging, and similar to the analogy of you're at the cupboard, what are you going to do? For me, in those moments of my stress, I chose to draw and meditate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how this, so thank you for asking. That's how this.
And I'll just say that I followed all of your inspirational quotes and drawings, and they're beautiful. And
yeah.
So many of them spoke to me and really helped get me through a day, just so you know.
Well, I'm going to add to that. If anybody would like to see them, they're all on my Instagram account, which is my name, Susan Schrott Therapy. For now, that is the name of my Instagram account, Susan Schrott Therapy. It will probably be retitled soon. And as the news is unveiled about what's happening with all these, I'm being a little mysterious, sorry. I'm excited.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And I think that at the end of the day, the images and the work really supports the work that I do as a therapist and folks who are looking for another source to put in, another little tool to look at, right? Look at the images, look at the quote. If it speaks to you and helps, great.
You know, I'm just going to do a little plug, because speaking of tools, because of this work that you do, I invited you to be one of the tools in my toolbox. Oh. And you came and were an incredible instructor in my online intuitive eating program. Came for several, actually three, I don't even want to call them lectures, interactive sessions where you showed people, just like what we did, going through mindful exercises and sort of how to diffuse, let go of some of those thoughts that really drive the behaviors.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that. People, anyone who wants to hear more of Susan can come and take my online intuitive eating program. So we have lots of things that we share in office. So
privileged to work with you, and I expect to be doing so for a long time. Yeah,
Susan, thank you so much for coming on. And I just feel like I'm in the room next door. I feel like we're right.
I'm in Manhattan. You're in Westchester. Isn't it incredible?
Yeah, we are both in New York, but in totally different places in New York.
Yes.
The power of technology. Yep. So, Susan, have a lovely day.
You as well. Thank you all, whoever chimed in and watching. And again, if anyone has any comments or questions, they can contact me. I'm happy to take any calls. If anybody wants, anything they want to ask me, they can. Just
what I'm going to do is I'm going to be posting this, and in addition, we'll have some of the notes, summary of what we've talked about, and some resources for people to learn more about you and more about your work and acceptance and commitment therapy. So, Susan, thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I'll see you in the office next week.
Bye-bye. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.